Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
And welcome in, everybody, to another edition of Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor alongside you. Jad Chambers producing as we make our way through a Tuesday and get ready for the first real week of NFL preseason games. A lot of storylines across the league to pay attention to, including in Kansas City, where we get some insight Monday from Brett Veach regarding Chris Jones. We'll get into that in just a little bit. We'll also take a look at the latest in the college realignment rumors. A potential marriage between the Bay Area schools remaining and the ACC. Does that make any sense at all? They're exploring it. We'll talk about that as well throughout the program. Lots to get into today. A couple other little interesting stories that have popped up. The Titans, Mike Vrabel, is going to hand off head coaching duties, which is interesting and quite frankly may make you like Mike Vrabel even more if you liked him before. And then another story that I think was one of the top stories yesterday, which is surprising, but it shows the power of social media sometimes. The Orioles' main broadcaster on TV was it sort of suspended for being honest. We'll get into that story as well, as it's pretty interesting. Of course, the IHOP hotline is open at 869-1240. Always, you can get in touch with us that way on the program. You can also leave comments on our video streams, now available to you on our KFH Facebook page and on YouTube and Twitch by searching KFH Radio. So check those out. If you haven't joined in our video stream, you can see Tommy and I's ugly mug as you listen to us. It's a great option, by the way, if you're at the office maybe and you just want to sort of subtly you need to chat with us, right? You can't call in on the IHOP hotline. You can leave us your comments there. You can leave us your comments on Twitter as well. We'll get to those throughout the program. Big giveaway day today and really for about the next week and a half here. So we've got, just hang tight with us here. So we have a pair of tickets to see Def Leppard, Motley Crue, and Alice Cooper in Tulsa on August 16th. So we'll give away a pair of those tickets. We have a pair of tickets to Thomas Rhett coming to Wichita next Friday. We'll give away a pair of those tickets. And we have some tickets to Blue Beetle, the new movie. It's coming to Boulevard Theaters here in Wichita. We'll get you tickets to a sneak preview for that, as well as some HTO iced tea. So a lot to give away throughout the program here today. So stay tuned for all your opportunities to win a wide variety of prizes on the show today as well. That sets us up. Tommy, how are you?
I was good, and now I'm even great hearing about all of those giveaways. I mean, we're very generous on this program, and you're not going to find that anywhere else. So throughout the show today, the rest of this week, into next week, we've got a lot of chances for you to win some great prizes.
Yeah, we love giving stuff away. That's one of the cool things that still remains about traditional radio, so we love that. Let's start in St. Joe with the Chiefs, Tommy. Not a lot of, movement happening right now. The big story is the lack of movement on a Chris Jones deal. We get some insight yesterday that, Kadarius Toney, the expectation is still week one, sort of a I'll believe it when I see it kind of a thing for me anyway. But the big one's Chris Jones, who remains not there. And Brett Veach talked to the Kansas City Star, and I think it was only the Kansas City Star for proper attribution here, talking about the Chris Jones situation, Tommy. So, give us the Cliff's Notes version of what Brett Veach had to say about the situation yesterday from Chiefs camp.
Well, I think that Brett Veach understands how crucial this is for the organization. And I'm not even talking about the deal itself, but the optics surrounding the deal and the holdout from Chris Jones. I think that's why he chose to talk to the Kansas City Star. And he talked to them in depth about sort of where the Chiefs are right now, where that negotiation is. And, I feel like, and actually I feel a little bit better after that interview from Brett Veach, because he could have very easily jumped in and taken shots at Chris Jones. We've seen that before. We've seen general managers who get frustrated or fed up or impatient with, superstars as they are
Owners,
negotiating. Owners do that too. Brett Veach was very, very complimentary of Chris Jones. And the fact that he did that publicly makes me think that they're also doing that privately with Chris Jones. That, it hasn't devolved into a situation of contention, of hurt feelings, of any of that. And maybe the Chiefs internally are being impatient and they're unhappy, but that's not anything that is being, I think, expressed to Chris Jones and his camp or, to the public. So one of the things that Brett Veach said that I thought was really interesting, and I sent this to you, was that he talked about how when the Chiefs made the move to trade Tyreek Hill, they did that with Chris Jones in mind. So his quote was, "You have to keep in mind that when we did make that move with Tyreek, one of the determining factors was because there was an expected Chris Jones deal. And so to do Tyreek, there was a concern of, would we be able to do Chris?" That speaks to what we've talked about over the last few days and few weeks about how the Chiefs have to be forward thinking. They have to look ahead, and they have done that. And the fact that they made a move with Tyreek Hill, and one of the factors in that move was, if we do this, will this help us be able to re-sign Chris Jones, leads me to believe that he's been in their long-term plans all along. And I think that ultimately, again, something is going to get done, because the Chiefs wouldn't have moved Tyreek Hill and not be able to get something done with Chris Jones.
The Tyreek Hill situation was also similar in the sense that, at least according to the initial reporting, and I'm relying on memory here. So the order of things in that is they were ready to get a Tyreek Hill deal done. And then Devontae Adams was traded and signed that massive contract. And Tyreek Hill said, "Well, I want more than that." And they said, "We're not doing that." So there was a similarity there too, right? Chris Jones probably came in a little bit higher at the negotiating table than the Chiefs were prepared for. I do agree. The fact that they didn't immediately pivot and say, "Sorry, we're moving on," is a good sign if you're in the camp, which I think almost everybody is, of, wanting Chris Jones to be back. But I do think what Brett Veach also alludes to there is this Chris Jones deal has implications on other plans they may have, just like it did with Tyreek Hill. And they pivoted because they knew, you know what? We don't want this to compromise a Chris Jones deal down the road. We value that higher. So what I've wondered from the beginning is, how much higher is Chris Jones' camp than what the Chiefs were prepared for? Because they had to be prepared, right? Like, it is impossible for me to imagine that just all of a sudden Chris Jones's camp came with what they were looking for, right? So the Chiefs have had to be preparing for this to some degree, because it's not like Quinnen Williams, right, reset the market or something. Like, if he wants 30 million, he wanted 30 million before or after Quinnen Williams got his deal. No, everybody knew Quinnen Williams wasn't going to get 30 million. So if Chris Jones wants 30 million, if you believe that reporting, he will have wanted 30 million for a long time. What might have changed is the Chiefs saw what Quinnen Williams got and said, the market doesn't say 30 million here. And that could have happened. So what Brett Veach also alludes to, though, the future plans, is what I've been talking about. If they have to go way over where they wanted to go with Chris Jones, it impacts future plans. And then it becomes, you almost have to look at it, set emotions in it to the side, right? Because you have to. I'm sure that every general manager would love to re-sign every player. Like, you do get an emotional attachment to guys. It's not easy. It's not as black and white as and cutthroat, I think, as it appears on the outside, but it has to be at the end of the day. So if you're Brett Veach, you also have to evaluate, what does this potentially do? Does this cost us somebody else down the road? And who are we willing to let it cost us? And that's where I think this gets a little complicated. If it costs you, a linebacker, a defensive back, I think you can live with that. But I'm telling you, if it costs you these offensive linemen, I think it's a much more difficult decision. If you can't map those guys in with Chris Jones, because think about, Tommy, how expensive trying to find a left tackle has been for the Chiefs, both through trade and now free agency with Jawan Taylor. Like, think about that. They had to give up the draft capital. Now, they won't regret that because they got a Super Bowl out of Orlando Brown. But it did cost them draft capital and ultimately then free agency money anyway. It's been really hard for them to find a long-term left tackle. I don't think they have much interest in investing that much time, energy, and resources into an offensive line when you have the main components of it already there. You just have to re-sign it. So I do think that complicates it more than any of us imagined it would, I don't know, 4 months ago, or even shorter when Chris Jones was sitting out of OTAs. Like, I don't think any of us thought that this would change the Chiefs' plan, but that's the only thing I can come up with, Tommy, as to why this is not done yet, is because it is altering the Chiefs' plan, and they're still having to evaluate what that looks like.
Yeah, and I want to be clear that all this time that I've been advocating for the Chiefs to pay Chris Jones, I completely understand that if you're paying him more than what you have allotted to him, then you have to make sacrifices elsewhere on the team. Totally understand that. And I get that. I also trust Brett Veach, if he does that, to be able to find players to make it work and be successful. I know that you have kind of automatically gone to connecting the dots between them paying Chris Jones more and sacrificing offensive linemen, but I'm not sure that it's that black and white. I mean, we don't know that. We don't know that it's actually going to cost them offensive linemen. It could cost them a defensive back. It could cost them a linebacker. We don't know that. And we don't know how much the Chiefs have budgeted for Chris Jones. I mean, if Chris Jones wants $30 million and they had budgeted, I don't know, 26, then that's a $4 million gap. You can probably make that up over the next couple of years in a variety of areas. So I'm not ready yet to come to the conclusion that if they sign Chris Jones, they're risking that offensive line that they have spent draft capital on, they've spent a lot of money on, and they've tried to build to protect Patrick Mahomes. I don't want it to come to that point, just like you don't, but I'm not ready yet to connect those dots.
So here's the more connectable dots, because they hit free agency a year earlier than the guys we're talking about now. The big ones next year that will be free agents for the Chiefs, and the ones that would strike the hardest, I think, for fans are Willie Gay Jr. and L'Jarius Sneed. So, I think, and this is the part of it we're never going to have, enough information on until this ultimately settles itself. If I asked you, would you take Chris Jones if it cost you one of, if not both, Tommy, Willie Gay Jr. and L'Jarius Sneed? Willie Gay Jr. Will be 26 years old. Sorry, he'll be 27 years old, I believe, at free agency. L'Jarius Sneed would be 28. I would answer that question as I would rather have Chris Jones than and take the risk on. As much as I like those players, I'll take Chris Jones and try and draft replacements there, or go with lesser expensive options in free agency. So that would be my preference. Now, if it gets to the point, and this is the part we don't know, because the salary cap is this crazy formula. So that's one scenario, right? So what if, though, Tommy, we look one more year ahead at free agency, and now you're talking about Justin Reed, you're talking about Kadarius Toney, you're talking about Creed Humphrey, you're talking about Trey Smith, you're talking about Justin Ross, you're talking about Lucas Niang. 2025 looks pretty brutal for the Chiefs. And that's why I keep going back to, length of this deal probably matters significantly, because if you can figure out a way to do the deal where the money goes in weird places, right? But maybe in 2025, it's not all right there at 2025, then maybe. But if I presented you the scenario of, Chris Jones now, or 31-year-old Chris Jones versus, honestly, either Creed Humphrey or Trey Smith, I think I go the offensive lineman there. And then you get into the weird situation of Kadarius Toney and Justin Ross. What if one of those guys takes off, right? There's just 2025 is going to be a rough year. It's going to be a rough off season, one way or the other. And you hope that it's even more rough because these players all develop and become great players that are going to command a lot of money. That's a best case scenario, but it's probably a worst case scenario for Chris Jones right now because the Chiefs do have to do that. And whether those receivers pan out or not, I do think you have to bake in the desire to bring back Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith at the minimum. Justin Reed, we'll see. He's older, so I'm not terribly concerned about that, even though we've liked Justin Reed, right? But it's Humphrey and Smith because they're young. They'll be entering free agency with no age risk really associated to it, and they'll be in a position where you got to protect 15. That's where I look as the concern here. I don't think it's next year. I think it's 25 where it really becomes concerning for the Chiefs.
What does Brett Veach do very well? We've talked about it before. He drafts really well.
Lately he drafts really well. Yeah.
And he finds diamonds in the rough in free agency to supplement the talent, the major talent on the team. Like he's done that very well. And he's been very masterful in that. I'm with you. I don't want to lose Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith. You finally feel fairly comfortable with the offensive line that Kansas City has after years of not feeling comfortable whatsoever. So I don't want to sacrifice that. But at the same time, some of those other names that you listed off, if the Chiefs move Tyreek Hill, they can move Kadarius Toney. They can move Justin Ross,
yeah.
Right?
Those guys are, don't care.
It is what it is at that point. But even if they lose guys like Justin Reed and L'Jarius Sneed and Willie Gay Jr., I've got no doubt in my mind that Brett Veach will draft quality replacements or go and sign quality replacements at the league minimum or whatever it is. I mean, he's a wizard at that sort of thing. So my thought is nothing is guaranteed, right? Super Bowl wins are never guaranteed. Would you rather? I know I'm bad at like throwing out like old like grandpa sayings, but I'm going to throw one out there right now. Is it better to have a bird in the hand or two in the bush, right? Like you've got a bird in the hand right now with this team and with Chris Jones still playing at a high level. I'm of the belief and I'm of the opinion, go all in now because nothing else is guaranteed, So
yeah,
I feel like you,
I
right?
disagree with you
that's
and the masses on that. When you have Mahomes, I think you play the long game because I think Mahomes is always going to give you a chance to win a Super Bowl. I don't think there's as much of a need and the urgency to push all your chips in. One, when you've had the recent success the Chiefs have had, and two, when you inherently have this window that's long with Patrick Mahomes. If he's able to stay healthy and effective. So here's like, let me simplify it as much as I can. Patrick Mahomes is the most important thing to the Kansas City Chiefs. As he approaches 30 and older and beyond, the second most important thing for the Kansas City Chiefs is to protect Patrick Mahomes. That is my order of business for Kansas City. You take care of Patrick Mahomes off the field, and then you take care of Patrick Mahomes on the field. You make sure as he ages, a part of Tom Brady's longevity is the fact that the dude never got hit for like 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Why? Because the Patriots always invested in their offensive line, and they let a lot of really good players go. I think right now, you also have to cook into the fact, and you give the credit to Brett Veach, and he deserves a lot of credit for it, but so does Andy Reid and the coaching staff. They coach up a lot of players too and put players in a good position to succeed. Players that go other places that, probably aren't nearly as successful. So it is becoming fairly simple for me. If it cost me Willie Gay and L'Jarius Sneed, I don't care. Get Chris Jones back. But if there's any consideration that it cost me Trey Smith and or Creed Humphrey, don't do the deal. See if he'll play for 1 year, and then that's going to be the end of it. And it breaks my heart because I love Chris Jones. He is one of my all-time favorite defensive players to watch, and I don't want that to happen. But if Chris Jones, who's also aging, needs to, in his mind, get that one last big payday, I totally get it. I just don't know if it should come from the Chiefs because I think there are other things they have to do to make sure Patrick Mahomes, as he gets 30, Patrick Mahomes is going to be able to play on a busted leg forever like he did last year. You've got to make sure that he is upright, not taking hits, being healthy. And the only way you can do that is with a solid, consistent offensive line And that, to me, becomes the second most important thing that the Chiefs can do. And, Tommy, I think that they're telling us that's what they value the most, too, with the amount of resources through high draft picks, through free agency, through trades that they've invested in that line. I think that they're telling us that, too. So if that's priority 2, which I think it is, and maybe Kelsey is right now, I don't know. I don't know where Chris Jones falls in. And that's where I think we have this dilemma. It's length of deal and what does it do in that 25 free agency class that's making this more difficult. Then I think a lot of people would just be like, just pay Chris Jones. He's incredible. He's one of the best players in football. True. Won't get an argument from me on that. I just think he's not a higher priority than that offensive line. That's it. That's all it is for me.
I agree with you that offensive line is supremely important. I saw Patrick Mahomes, and we all did, run for his life in the Super Bowl against the Buccaneers. And at that point, it was like, this is not working. They got to do something. They got to completely rebuild this offensive line. And they've done that. I don't want to sacrifice that either. But I'll go back to what I said a few minutes ago. I'm not ready yet to connect the dots that you sign Chris Jones and you can't have that offensive line. I think there are still ways to make that happen.
I do too, but I think that's why this is taking so long. I mean, I think that's the reality of the situation. Is that's the elephant in the room. Is that? But we'll see. There's still plenty of time, and nobody's. I mean, Andy Reid said he'd like to have Chris Jones back yesterday. Of course he would, but nobody's worried about that. I don't think. Okay, let's start some giveaways here. Let's do Thomas Rhett first today, Jad. What do you say? Let's make it a pair of tickets to Thomas Rhett. He's coming to Intrust Bank Arena next Friday. I'll actually be at that show, so maybe I'll run into you. Let's do a pair of tickets. We'll start there. Lots more opportunities to win different things, but we'll do our second caller during this first break at 869-1240 on the IHOP hotline for a pair of Thomas Rhett tickets. Good luck, everybody. We'll get you a winner on the other side and continue with more Sports Daily. All right, Travis, our first big winner today for some concert tickets. Travis and one lucky guest will go see Thomas Rhett on the 18th at Intrust Bank Arena. If you see me, Thomas, say hi. I'd love to meet you. Congratulations on the win, courtesy of us here at Sports Daily and KFH. We've got Def Leppard, Motley Crue, and Alice Cooper tickets still to come. We've got Blue Beetle sneak preview movie tickets still to come. We've got HTO, iced tea, and coffee still to come as well. So stay tuned for your chances to win on the program today and each day as we make our way through the next 10 days or so. We've got a lot of stuff to give away. We're really excited to be able to do that. Let's continue the Chiefs talk here, Tommy, and we'll sort of set this up. You know, I think that we talked Justin Ross has been opening a lot of eyes. Well, yesterday, Sky Moore was opening eyes. He had a great day at practice, at least according to the portion of practice that the media was privy to and taking video of. And another report came out, and man, I wish I could remember who I saw this because you get them mixed up, but it's being reported that Sky Moore has basically gotten all the reps with the ones, and some of the others have been mixed in with the twos. So that's that, and that matters, I think, you know, right now, because these reps and these practices mean a lot. So it looks like even with some of the others having really nice camps, that Sky Moore is being, you know, elevated into that, you know, top spot right now with Kadarius Toney out, Tommy. And I think all things considered, that probably is a best case scenario for the Chiefs that that's happening.
Yeah, I think it is too. I mean, he is obviously somebody that the Chiefs have felt really, you know, good about and thought very highly of ever since he was drafted. I think that he was, I don't want to say he was misused last year. I mean, he was forced into some roles that I'm not sure were the best fit for him.
I think he was misused last year.
You know, he's not a punt returner. And the fact that they trotted him out as a punt returner for multiple games throughout the season, I know it was kind of a matter of necessity at that point, but, you know, until Kadarius Toney was healthy, and then he kind of took that over. But man, I think what that did last year for him was it damaged his confidence a little bit. It kind of prevented him from getting into the groove and finding ways to be productive as a wide receiver. That there was a stretch of games. I mean, remember, it was really bad for Sky Moore returning punts. And I think that did translate onto the field when he was a wide receiver. So the fact that they're moving away from that, I think, and allowing him to be the number one wide receiver during training camp, that speaks volumes, I think, from what they feel about Sky Moore.
Yeah, I do too. And I think the other part of it was the Chiefs were changing so much of what they were doing offensively that there was naturally and inherently more comfort with having veterans in Juju Smith-Schuster and McCole Hardman, and just guys who have been around, you know, longer to take on some of the burden of doing that change. I think there were a combination of things, but listen, by the time the Super Bowl rolls around, we can all begin to see it with Sky Moore, right? Those things that a lot of us liked about him coming out. It's like, okay, because he just seems like such a good fit in this offense, such a good fit with Patrick Mahomes. And you're starting to see that in practice now. As a part of the interviews we're getting with Steve and Ted, with Mitch Holthus, the voice of the Chiefs. Of course, we're radio partners with the Chiefs. So Mitch Holthus, you'll hear on our Odyssey family frequently. He's sending audio, and then by way of Steve and Ted, we're getting some of that. Holthus sat down with Sky Moore, and it starts here with what we were just talking about, that sort of light bulb Super Bowl where Sky Moore was a big factor.
Man, it helped my confidence tremendously. You know, leading into this season, I was on a good roll, and I just wanted to try my best to carry it into this season.
And what about your training regimen? Because it looks like you're stronger this year, especially the lower body.
Yeah, I really just got out on the field more, and got to running a little bit more. Me and Justin locked in, got with our receiver trainer, and really did a lot of field work this year versus the usual traditional college lifting and running. We got real technical on the field this year.
And what about all the stuff they want you to do? I mean, it's exciting. You're everywhere.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm loving it. I'm soaking it all in. I'm more comfortable in the offense, so it allows me to just be me and show my ability.
Yeah, I mean that confidence is what. How about that? Pennsylvania accent. Is that a Philly accent? I don't know what it is. But it's pretty cool. It is confidence. Confidence is key, and he's got it now. And I think by what we're seeing in practice, Mahomes has a lot of confidence in him. Mahomes isn't. At least he doesn't strike me as the kind of quarterback like Aaron Rodgers. You got to earn it, right? Like I'm not throwing to you unless I'm comfortable with you as a receiver. Patrick Mahomes doesn't do that. Patrick Mahomes is like, if you're the guy and you're in the spot, I'm throwing to you. So catch the dang ball. Like it's very interesting to me and has been to watch Mahomes, because Mahomes, man, he just does not care. He doesn't care who it is. If that's the spot, he's going there. And that takes a pretty bold mindset from a quarterback to do. And Patrick Mahomes is in no danger, so maybe it's easier for him to do. But I think Sky Moore fits, and I think Sky Moore makes a lot of sense in this offense. And I think that, as you need to expand some of maybe what Travis Kelce does to others, Sky Moore makes a lot of sense to do that. Different player than some of the other weapons they're going to have in the offense, but a chance to be, the top receiver. What do you think the chances are, Tommy, with everything we know about the wide receiver room, that Sky Moore is the top guy this year at wide receiver? I think they're pretty good, because I think he'll be on the field more than Kadarius Toney.
I think it is good too. And we've been kind of talking about this for quite a while, where this was the year that Sky Moore needed to take a big step forward, and the opportunity is in front of him. He has the skill set. He's got the athleticism. There's a reason why the Chiefs drafted him and have put him into positions, even as a rookie, where maybe he was misplaced. Maybe he wasn't put in the best situations, but they were putting him in situations, right? Like if they didn't trust him, if they didn't like him, they wouldn't have put him anywhere. But they did, even if it was misplaced. So the fact that I think he's now in a role where he can thrive in a wide receiver room, where that while Kadarius Toney is incredibly talented, he's fragile and has a hard time staying on the field. That Marquez Valdez-Scantling is a veteran, but he's not going to be a volume receiver for the Chiefs. So that. And then everybody else is pretty unproven. Rashee Rice is unproven. Justin Ross is unproven. Richie James, we haven't talked about him in a while. We don't know if he's going to be able to come back and play at a high level, right? So I think that there is the opportunity there for Sky Moore to just naturally transition into that number one wide receiver role. I think he can do it, and I think he can do it well.
Well, look, the Chiefs have invested the most capital in Sky Moore, Rashee Rice, and Kadarius Toney, and Moore and Rice even to a higher degree than Toney. So they tell you what they want to do in that capacity too, but they have a good backup plan. We've talked about it. It actually feels like this is a very deep and talented room with Justin Ross developing, and sort of safety nets and MVS and Richie James potentially, and Justin Watson. I don't know if they'll keep 7 guys. I don't know who the odd man out is there if that happens, but it's sure nice to have them now when you don't know what's going to happen with Kadarius Toney, and you don't know how, can Justin Ross continue his development. But, for the Chiefs portion of camp, that's sort of it. That's sort of what we're watching right now. We'll see Sunday, and we don't have yet the word on how much guys are going to play. I'm trying to remember now with just the 3 games. This feels like the spot where you would get, what is it? Like 2 series probably out of the starters. Is that how Andy Reid does it in that first game, and then he works them up to like a first half?
Yeah, it's not going to be a lot. Don't expect to see, those guys in any length of time.
And they don't show a lot either. But I think where guys are placed is worth watching, right? Like who are the ones? Who do the Chiefs feel are the ones right now? That I think is what we can pay a little bit of attention to. But that's the latest from St. Joe as it pertains to the Chiefs. We'll continue to watch, obviously, the Chris Jones situation. I did think it was interesting that Brett Veach made the time specifically to talk about it yesterday. I think that's a good sign, Chris Jones fans. I think that's a good thing that you're seeing that still. Tommy, you brought it up. Like, doesn't always go that way. It's, a lot of time upper management gets in and gets their feelings hurt and, feels betrayed or whatever. But, it feels like things are still cordial for now on both sides. Chris Jones hasn't given us any, hints at real hostility yet either. So we'll continue to check in Chiefs camp as we make our way through the show today. Let's stick with the NFL. When we come back, I want to touch on this story with Mike Vrabel. I think it's really cool what he's doing there. And something that, man, I don't ever remember seeing something like this. So we'll tell you what that is. We'll come back. We'll give away another one of our prizes in the next segment as well. So stay tuned for your opportunity to win. Won't tell you which one, but they're all great. So here we go. If you'd like to chime in, 869-1240 is the number to call. It's Albracht and Castor. It's Sports Daily. Jack Chambers producing for us. We'll be right back. All right, here we go. Let's start things off with a pair of movie tickets this time. Blue Beetle is coming to Boulevard Theaters in Wichita. You can check it out a day early on us. A pair of tickets for a special screening. That's Thursday, August 17th. Next Thursday at 7 o'clock, Boulevard Theaters at Town West. Blue Beetle, Boulevard Theaters in Wichita. You can get a pair of sneak peek tickets right now on us at the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. Chad will get us our second winner of the day. Tommy, Mike Vrabel is going to have his assistant coach, Terrell Williams, not sure which way it's pronounced, to serve as the head coach for a preseason game against the Bears on Saturday. And by all accounts here, from what I can tell, and I didn't see this story until this morning, it's just Vrabel throwing his guy a bone here. A guy that's been coaching for a long time that he feels like has the chops to get this thing done at the next level would be my guess. A guy who's been a coach in the league for, 26 seasons, the last 12 of which have come in the NFL. Do you remember ever seeing anything like this?
I don't, not to this level. And I think that, Vrabel commented that the reason he's doing this is because Williams has the knack for being able to connect with players on both sides of the ball. He's been a defensive coach for a long time, but Vrabel cited that he can coach up and work with and have great positive connections with guys on the offensive side of the ball too. So I think this is him propping up, a longtime coach in the NFL who Vrabel believes could be and should be an NFL head coach someday. And so I like this move a lot. Vrabel's not going anywhere. Like he's still going to be on the sidelines. The report from CBS says that he's going to be coaching the linebackers in the preseason game on Saturday. But by all accounts, the major decision-making and all of that, the head coaching role for the preseason game, it'll belong to Williams.
It's really cool. It's just how do you not root for Mike Vrabel, by the way? He's old school. Yeah. He's a defensive coach. There's not anybody that would look at what the Titans have done and think it's not in part due to great coaching, right? Like that hasn't been, it's been a non-traditional roster, we should say, as far as the way the NFL looks currently, right? Like it's different. He does it a different way. We do remember him as a player if you're of our age, right? And you remember him well. He was a key part of those early Patriots dynasty. I love this. And by the way, when I think about Eric Bieniemy, a guy who, for whatever reason, as we've discussed ad nauseum, hasn't had a chance, who is, I think, making a positive impact, by the way, in Washington right now. He is he's been, his intensity is something that they're adjusting to there in Washington, which is funny. But good on Mike Vrabel. I always say, like, put your money where your mouth is. He thinks this guy who's been with him now is great. And the league talks about, action plans with interviews to help minority coaches and all that. Mike Vrabel said, watch this. He's going to coach this game. Watch what he can do. Man, put your money where your mouth is and you just go. Man, yeah. I love it.
It's less about forming committees and focus groups and, having politicians get involved about,
right,
how you're hiring in the NFL. Vrabel's just like, look, I'm going to put matters into my own hands and I'm just going to let this guy coach. And I like that a lot. I like that he's got the trust in Williams to step aside. There are so many coaches that are control freaks, that they can't let anybody in. They got to,
in a good way,
but they've got to make sure that they have, their hands on every single thing because they're the head man and ultimately they're responsible for it. And I like that Vrabel is confident and comfortable enough that he feels like he can step aside for a preseason game and let Williams show what he can do.
It is one of the cooler stories I've seen come out of the league, and it snuck up. Like, I had not seen that until this morning. And I am very much, do as I do, not what I say sometimes. Like, let me just lead by example here. And Vrabel, that has an impact. If nothing else, what has a bigger impact, Tommy, to a guy like Williams, who I don't know anything about, by the way, just full disclosure. I don't know much about the Titans defensive line coach. But guess what? A lot of people don't know a lot about him. But man, this absolutely puts him in the spotlight and on the radar. for the next time we have these. So what do you think's more meaningful for him? A league policy interview or tangible evidence that this guy is capable of doing this? I mean, that's it. So good on Mike Vrabel. Good on the Titans for letting him do it, by the way. Although I suspect that Mike Vrabel's the kind of guy that doesn't ask permission on something like that. He does what he wants, which is another thing I appreciate about Mike Vrabel. But just really cool. It's such a cool story and one that I can't wait to watch.
When was the last time that a coach, and I don't know the answer to this, had an assistant fill in for a game? Like, I know that there'll be interim coaches when coaches get fired and things like that. Yeah. I'm thinking like maybe health issues, or I'm sure that there have been situations before where you've had coaches that have stepped away temporarily to take care of something, and then somebody else steps in. But what makes this different is the fact that Vrabel's perfectly healthy. There's nothing wrong with him. He just wants to give his guy a shot.
Yeah. I mean, it's just him looking out for his guy that he thinks deserves it and has earned it. And when you think about the challenges or things that you've heard about Eric Bieniemy, and it was never, a lot of the time, I think it was just quite simply like, you can't get out of Andy Reid's shadow, which is why he's gone now. And you don't blame him for doing it. That this sort of helps that. And I'm not saying the Chiefs should have done this with Eric Bieniemy. Don't misunderstand. I just think it's an outside the box, forward thinking way for Mike Vrabel maybe to see what's happened in some of these cases and be like, no, that's not going to happen to this guy who has earned his chance. Let's be proactive and make this a year that, he can do something special and maybe get that opportunity the next time around as hires are made. So good on Mike Vrabel for doing that. That was just a pretty cool story there to follow.
Real quick, though, I want to mention, I know that you had brought up Eric Bieniemy. Ron Rivera was asked about Eric Bieniemy. I don't know if you read that. And Ron Rivera basically said the players have to adjust to his intensity, that he and Jack Del Rio, they've both been head coaches before, so they have a different approach. And Eric Bieniemy's approach is, this is the way we're doing things offensively. And he kind of rides the players a little bit. So hopefully, the longer that he's there in Washington, he can learn from guys like Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio and be able to figure out how he wants to be a head coach, because that's going to be the most important thing for him if he wants to be the head guy someday.
Absolutely. There's no question. I mean, Eric Bieniemy, look, if Washington's offense takes off, especially with their quarterback situation, Eric Bieniemy will be hired next year. I mean, it will happen. Yeah. So it's a big year for them in that way. And they have some weapons for him to work with. If he can prove it with a quarterback right now there, he's going to get hired. I'll make that prediction right now. If that's a, good offense, Bieniemy will be a head coach next year. 869-1240 is the number to call on the IHOP hotline. We'll continue to give away prizes. 2 more to come here in hour number 2. We'll get to the latest in conference realignment, and interesting development that, quite frankly, doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but we'll address it, and it's real. Like, it's not pretend. The ACC potentially adding the Bay Area schools. That's next on Sports Daily. Albracht and Castor on a Tuesday. We'll be right back.
Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome back in, everybody, to another hour of Sports Daily here. Jacob Albracht and Tommy Castor taking you through till 11 o'clock. Glad to be here with you. Chad Chambers producing for us. We've got all kinds of fun things to give away. We've given away Thomas Rhett tickets. We preview movie tickets. Still to come, Def Leppard, Motley Crue, and Alice Cooper tickets, and some HTO iced tea and coffee as well. So a lot of opportunities for you to win this week and next week on the program today. Happy to be able to do that for you. We talked some Chiefs training camp, Chris Jones situation, and more there in the first hour. You can always go back and listen for free on the Odyssey app and the podcast version of the show. If you don't listen to it live, that's available for you each and every day. Jad cuts it up, gets it up there. So we'd invite you to check that out if you ever miss anything that we're talking about that piques your interest. All right, this hour, we will begin with the latest in conference realignment. A lot of reporting out there on this all the time. We always throw disclaimers out on that. But the big rumor yesterday, and I don't think it's a rumor. I think there's enough there that there's substance to it. The ACC potentially exploring adding Cal and Stanford, the Bay Area schools. That to me, and I am always the first to say travel's not that big a deal in all this, but this situation, it feels like it might be a big deal. I don't know where this is coming from. I know that, the ACC has a lot of schools in that really fancy academic group, and of which Cal and Stanford both belong. Stanford is one of the most successful athletic departments in the country, year in, year out, when you look across all sports. But I don't know that they add TV value at all. And that's a question for the networks to answer. But I would bet you if you polled network executives on the appeal and the addition of those two schools, even though they're both in the Bay Area, like, Tommy, how much of an appetite for college sports do you think that there is in the Bay Area?
I don't think that there's a ton. I've seen pictures of the Stanford Stadium for home games, and it is pretty empty. And that I mentioned that a few weeks ago, how far Stanford has fallen, right? Like, it wasn't that long ago that Jim Harbaugh was their coach, and, they were up there in the polls and they were competing at a high level, and they've just kind of fallen off a cliff ever since then. If this was the Stanford of 10 years ago, then yeah, I think that they provide a significant amount of value to be in a new conference. But man, right now, I just don't see it.
I mean, a bunch of tech nerds up there that probably went to an Ivy League school. Like, they're not watching college sports. They're probably watching the NFL or, right, doing whatever else, really smart billionaires do that live in the Bay Area. I mean, come on now. And you got the 49ers up there. You got stuff that just doesn't, it's never struck me as like the college hotbed of, fandom and everything else. Just there's so much going on up there. And there is some reporting that there's truth to that the networks don't see that market as appealing as just its size. I can't think of, and honestly, it bleeds up into Washington too. I know a lot of people that live in that area, and I don't think they're just like diehard college sports fans. It's just different, right? It's a different part of the country with different things to do. All jokes aside, I don't know what the appeal would be for the ACC to do just that. Now, if the ACC wanted to come in and add like all the remaining, add Oregon State and Washington State, who, by the way, I think would probably have more eyeballs on them than Cal and Stanford when push comes to shove, just because I think those two schools have pretty crazy rabid fan bases. I think that, and it's more than just football to some degree, but it's football. I think that adding all four and then, and then exploring maybe some other additions, that would make some sense. The ACC right now has to look in the mirror. And we talked about this yesterday, and just they need to be prepared and know right now today, what are the schools that are going to leave us? Not maybe or when or like when they figure this out, which schools are leaving? It sure sounds like at least Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, and Virginia would. Maybe Miami. So I think, too, if you're the ACC, there can be a piece of this of like, okay, we've seen now what's happened to the Big 12. The Big 12 got raided, even though the Big 12, I contend, did everything it could to keep Oklahoma and Texas. And it was hurting the league to some degree. They got raided, but they immediately had an action plan, and it saved and ultimately strengthened their conference. The Pac-12 did the exact opposite. Pac-12 was naive in this. One, they didn't see USC and UCLA coming. That's forgivable to some degree, not anymore, but at the time I would say, okay, maybe forgivable. But not reacting quickly is not, and it's the death of the conference. So if you're the ACC, you've got to look at that and say, okay, what can we do right now? Because this is coming. Like, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
What can we do? Well, you could get ahead of you could get ahead of it, right? And say, let's get bigger now. We know we're going to lose some, but we'll already be big enough to be able to absorb that blow to some degree. And right now, if you're the ACC and you want to survive as the ACC, where do you go to do that? I think that's where you'd go, right? The remaining Pac-12 and the best of everybody else, right? Like the best of the group of five. And I think that's where, if the ACC is doing that, good for them, because that's what you got to do at this point.
There's a commissioner and a conference that is kind of flying under the radar right now that I am really interested in knowing what his plans are and what their plans are as a conference. And that's the American and Mike Oresco, the commissioner of the American. Can they be aggressive right now? Can they be the hunter again, as opposed to being the hunted? They were aggressive after they lost Cincinnati and Houston and UCF. They went out and they got schools as replacements that definitely are not the profile of the schools they lost, but they added in sheer number a quantity that helped them out. Can they do that again? Can they be forward thinking? And I'm not suggesting that they go to the ACC and say, let's try to merge. Or go to the Pac-4, whatever's left, and say, let's try to merge. I think that's out of their purview, a little bit more higher than their scope right now. But I do think that there are ways that the American can stay competitive and be right outside that threshold of the power conferences
they can move up
college
because
athletics.
The Pac-12's gone. I mean, they could move up.
They can. And keep in mind, if they don't do anything, if they just kind of sit back, they run the real risk of more schools being poached from their conference.
Oresco, you can say what he has never not been aggressive. Like Oresco is not, he is more akin to Brett Yormark than Kliavkov, right? Like he is aggressive. And so, yeah, I wouldn't put it past him. I don't know what's out there right now. And I'll be full disclosure, I have a hard time grasping the American piece of this because I just do not spend 1 ounce of time with the football product, right? I don't watch American football outside of Cincinnati in recent years, right? With the run that they've had and the one-off years we've seen out of UCF and Houston and things like that. But as a whole, I'm not watching that football product, and that football product has nothing to do with us here because Wichita State doesn't have football. So I'm never really thinking about the American in a football sense. They have schools that people may still want, right? Tulane makes sense for people. Memphis makes sense for people. Probably USF, I would imagine, does to some degree. So, and SMU obviously does too. I just don't know. I don't have a good grasp of the American football. So, where they stand with the Mountain West. I've said forever, I thought the American and the Mountain West should just sort of merge and protect each other, right, at the same time, because that would be easily, football-wise, the best of the group of five. There's not one that would be close to that particularly. And it'd be a good basketball league, too. It'd enhance the basketball brand for sure. I don't know that that's going to happen. The Mountain West is in a pretty good position now. What do you think, though? Here, let me say this too. I don't think the the ACC is going to add just Cal and Stanford. I don't think it makes any sense.
No.
But they're having the conversations, which tells me that probably they're thinking about expansion because they know what's coming. And that, I mean, good for them if they do that. That's what it tells me. They're trying to come up with a plan, big picture now, of how do we avoid the fate of the Pac-12, because you cannot avoid the fate of the Big 12, right? You will not be able to stop that when it happens, and it's going to happen. You can't stop that if you're the ACC. So getting a jump on what happens in the aftermath, there's really, really smart, in my opinion. What can the ACC do? Well, they could add those two Western schools. But if you do that, you're going to have enough schools to sort of split the league in two. So does that happen with all four of them potentially as, as members that don't earn as much? Does that happen with Mountain West schools put into the mix? Do they come calling for, SMU and Memphis and some of these teams that are, that are real fringe Power 5 level? Like, can they do that and then have a West and an East? And maybe, but at least they're having the conversations now and not after the fact when ultimately teams start to leave them, which, by the way, remember, could happen in the next week. Florida State has a deadline of the 15th to get out. And if they can figure out this financial piece of it, which according to a lot of reporting, they're working very hard to do, they can be out. And it will happen by the 15th. And if that happens, we're going to see this again. The one thing is, though, if that's their deadline, it's other people's deadline. And there's been reporting that Florida State and Clemson are going to be out from the very beginning. So the ACC maybe is just out ahead of it. And if they are, good for them. Finally, somebody is, because thinking that you're immune to this is nonsense. You're not. And now you've got it. Like, you thought the grant of rights protected you. Now Florida State's like, oh, just go raise the money. Like, it's nothing's going to protect you from this. Absolutely nothing. You're toast. Those teams will leave when they figure out how to do it. That's the bottom line. I mean, they're saying it out loud now. They're not even hiding it. They're saying it.
And now we have a blueprint on what happens if you don't do anything.
Right.
If you just sit back. We have exactly, like, we know from the last week what happens to a conference that is highly esteemed and has been one of the top conferences in the United States for 100+ years. Gone. Doesn't matter. Tradition, nostalgia, doesn't matter. What matters is being aggressive and innovative and forward thinking. So the ACC, they have two choices. They can either try to follow the blueprint of the Pac-12, which by all accounts is a terrible blueprint to follow, or they can do what they can for self-preservation. Right.
The blueprint
they know,
to death.
They know they're going to lose Florida State. They know they're going to probably lose Clemson. They might even lose a handful of other schools. So how can you get out in front of this? And how can you be proactive as opposed to being reactive? And that will ultimately be the difference between the long-term fate of the ACC and what's happening to the Pac-12.
Well, you don't let it happen. I'm not saying you just like open the door up and say, see you later. You just have to acknowledge that it's going to happen. I would still, fine and charge any team that leaves to the full letter of the law and do all of those things. But
sure,
go expand before it happens. And then when they leave, you're still fine, right? Like, you're okay. Like, okay, well, you guys left and we still think we're in really good shape. That's, because the Big 12 now, Tommy, at 16 teams, a merger with the ACC is not going to happen. What you don't want to happen if you're the ACC, and I think this is where the big power play and the last critical piece of all this happens, what you don't want more than anything if you're the ACC is you don't want, when the SEC/Big Ten get the top end, you don't want then the Big 12 to sweep in behind them and also poach you. That's the danger to the ACC. Now, in Big 12 country, that'd be really cool if we added 4 ACC teams, right? Whatever it would end up being. But if you're the ACC, you can't let that happen. So, you can put together something that protects you to some degree for that happening, because that I don't think would happen before the current because isn't the current Big 12 deal like right in line with the ACC deal? Like they're very close in dollars, I think. So you wouldn't be in danger of that in the short term, but the appeal that the Big 12 is going to have is we get to the negotiating table quickly, relatively speaking, much quicker than they will in the ACC, and that could be enough, Tommy, to pull people away at that point. So I think that's why we're seeing these conversations being had about Cal and Stanford. I don't think Cal and Stanford add much value to anybody, quite frankly, right now. I mean, they would enhance the brand of the Mountain West, just like Oregon State and Washington State would. But I don't think they're in a position to really, they're not. There's not a fiscal advantage to having them in there. There's just not that. There's not like that. I mean, I'm sorry. Stanford is one of the coolest schools in the country as far as like tradition and history and everything else. But man, there ain't nobody that cares about Stanford and Cal. They just don't. They don't have any national appeal when it comes to football.
Yeah, I mean this with all due respect when I say this, but the commissioners of the SEC, Greg Sankey, the Big 12, Yormark, the Big 10, Tony Patetti, they're basically vultures right now. That's their job, is to be vultures and to circle around and to find schools that they can swoop up that are, in trouble, right? That they're circling the carcass of the Pac-12. If the ACC isn't careful, then those conferences are going to circle the carcass of the ACC. That's what they're doing right now, for lack of a better term. So the ACC, they know that they're going to lose a handful of teams. It's just going to happen. Those teams have pretty much made it clear. At least Florida State has up to this point. How do you protect yourself, self-preservation for the remaining schools? So, I mean, I think merger, and this is going to be the biggest thing. We can talk about merger all day long. We can talk about if the remaining Pac-12 schools in the ACC could talk about merging, maybe the Mountain West, whatever that looks like. What that is going to require is for egos to be put aside. And that's ultimately, I think, what killed the Pac-12. The egos couldn't get out of the way. And I mean, there were recipes for that conference to survive. There were ways, there were paths, there were avenues for that conference to survive. The ego of not only George Kliavkoff, but also the egos of the school presidents and all of that led to the demise of the Pac-12. They overvalued themselves in front of the networks. That was ego-driven. They weren't interested in talking merger with the Big 12. That was ego-driven. So a lot of this is going to come down to, can these schools in the ACC and the conference as a whole put their egos aside and say, man, we don't want to have to do this, but we're going to have to if we want to stay relevant and stay afloat. I don't know. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that, but that's what it's going to take.
Totally. And I don't know what the options are, but exploring West is about the only way to go. When you're talking about football, right? That's about all you can do. Or I know we don't want to hear it in this part of the world, but you consider the AAC. Memphis feels like it would be a fine fit in the AAC. SMU. I mean, SMU doesn't care. SMU's right in the middle of the country. They'll travel either direction. Who cares if you're SMU? You'd love to have that opportunity. Then the 4 remaining Pac-12s, that gives you 6. San Diego State, Boise State. Like if you can get enough, what does the ACC have now? Let me double check this. Because there's not anybody right now you could put, West. So there's 15 right now. Notre Dame competes in a lot of the sports, just not football. By the way, what's happening with Notre Dame? Anyway, who's maybe the most attractive piece that exists that just sits there. I don't know what they're doing. So you've got about 15 now. So you'd need a lot to create. Well, but you're going to lose. You'd probably get to 10. You'd probably lose 10 down to 10. You lose at least 5. I think Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, Virginia are all for sure gone. I think
Miami's probably gone.
I think Miami's probably gone. And that's the group for me. So then, if you get down to 10, could you come up with 10? If you took the 4 remaining Pac-12s, you took Memphis and SMU, that's 6. San Diego State, Boise State, UNLV, and then you'd need one more. And then you have an East and a West, and they don't really play each other outside of a championship game.
I've been saying this for a while, that what would make perfect sense is for that merger to happen. I don't know. You can call it the coast to coast conference, and you have two divisions. You have the Pac conference, or the Pac division, and you have the Atlantic division. And those divisions play within their division, and then you meet for a conference championship. You're still maintaining the brands, the individual brands of the Pac-12 and the ACC. You got the Pacific Division and the Atlantic Division. Call it the Nationwide Conference or the Coast to Coast Conference, or whatever you want to call it. I don't care what you call it, but you get to maintain the brands on each side. And really, at that point, you're protecting each other.
Don't you think, too, the Pac-12 and Big 12 missed an opportunity when we're talking about mergers and names to go the Pig 12? Pig 12, right? Like, you could have called yourself the Pig 12. It is what they should have done. I look back at it now, and I know it's not complicated, but man, the moment it happened, the moment the Big 12 got poached, why doesn't the Pac-12 and the Big 12 merge? And what did we say at the time? It's going to happen to the Pac-12. Yeah. So what are we saying now? It's going to happen to the ACC, and it will. How soon is the part we don't know, but it will. Okay. Look, the SEC right now is got the biggest stick in the room, right? Like which president said, go quietly but carry a big stick? Like, the SEC's got the big stick. They're not making the most noise. That the Big Ten's making the most noise. The Big 12's making noise. The SEC's got the big stick. And at some point, they're going to say, all right, let's do it. Let's go get our teams. And there ain't anybody that's going to say a word to the SEC. The TV networks, right. Thank you, may I have another, right? Like, okay, you want to add what? Great, perfect. We'll do anything you say, Mr. Sankey. Like, they're the kings here, don't forget.
The other storyline,
they haven't done it yet.
The other storyline to keep in mind, I don't think that expansion is going to be the end of realignment, because I think you're done with expansion. Then you maybe move into contraction, right? Is there a reason for Vanderbilt to be in the SEC? Is there a reason for Rutgers to be in the Big Ten?
Sure. Yeah, you're not.
You know what I mean? Like,
I don't think teams are going to get kicked out.
I think they will. I absolutely. I mean, at what point does Alabama or Georgia sit there and say, why does Vanderbilt make as much money as we do? That's not fair. Or Ohio State saying the same thing about Rutgers.
But do you recall a time in the history of the sport? Not that history is the only guideline. I don't recall a team ever getting kicked out of a league.
I think that when you're dealing with TV networks who are ruthless,
you want to know why
they're pulling the strings.
You want to know why Vanderbilt? You want to know why Vanderbilt and Rutgers aren't going to get kicked out? For the same reason that they're in, because it gives you Nashville, because it gives you New York. Like, that's why. It's eyeballs. People in Nashville love, whether they go to Vanderbilt or not, they love college sports. That's why. That's why they're not getting kicked out. 869-1240. The IHOP hotline is open. Let's do it. You can hear the music there. Chad's got it queued up and everything for us. It is that time. Let's go Def Leppard and Motley Crue tickets right now. The World Tour coming to H.A. Chapman Stadium in Tulsa, August 16th. Special guest Alice Cooper. You can get tickets at Ticketmaster.com, or you can get tickets on us right now. Third caller during the break, 869-1240. Rock and roll, Rocky roll as my kids call it. Let's go, Guitar Heroes. You got a chance to win those tickets right now during the break. Chad will get us a winner. We'll come back with more Sports Daily right after this. All right, congratulations. Brian is our winner, headed to Tulsa for Def Leppard and Motley Crue. By the way, congratulations to Grant for taking the Blue Beetle tickets a little while ago. We'll still have an HTO giveaway before the end of the program here, so stay tuned for that. Tommy, did you see the Kevin Brown situation? No, not the old pitcher for the Rangers and Marlins and I think Padres for a little bit, but Kevin Brown, the young broadcaster for Baltimore, who is very, very, very well respected within the industry. So Kevin Brown, who's their TV play-by-play guy, gets on and in his opening talks about how the Orioles have struggled to win in Tampa Bay in years past. By the way, they have, and talked about how they're turning a corner this year. Baltimore's having a great year. He was suspended by Baltimore management, by the Orioles. Like, the Orioles suspended him apparently for saying the truth that is not that disparaging. And man, people lost their minds about it yesterday, and the Orioles are getting railed. You had, longtime voices of teams within their own broadcast, like just throwing missiles the Orioles' way. I think it was the number one trending topic on social media for a little while. They suspend him. Now today they're coming and saying he'll be back soon. We don't talk about personnel issues. Like, what on earth are they thinking? And how, sensitive and petty are you? Look, we all know the deal. These are team-driven broadcasts. It's, rah-rah for the home team. But man, go back and watch the clip. It's not it's nothing. And God, I hope the Royals don't take a page out of that book, Tommy. Is, everyone's had to be hard on the Royals for the last few years. What else are you going to talk about? But this wasn't bad at all. It was crazy.
Well, what's weird about it is that not only was it true what he was saying, but also the Orioles are really good,
Yeah.
And so it's not like you're talking about a last place team that you are, concerned about and you're piling on. Like, it's a good team with a lot of positive things to say, and that's great. But I just don't understand the controversy around this. And if it's just the Orioles and their ownership being sensitive, but regardless, that's a really bad look for them.
Look, you get that's your employer. You don't want to disparage your employer. I totally get that. And there is, a line to some degree sometimes in that world. And it's a little, it's a little strange, but it's fine. I think everybody's comfortable with it. Man, he was nowhere near that line. Nowhere near that line. And it's like we deal with this. I deal with it all the time with teams and organizations or not just in sports, but in the news world too, where it's like there is a philosophy and a strategy that you just pretend everything is amazing all the time. The problem with that is nobody buys it. It's like, what? Ugh. That's not genuine at all. So when you have a guy, and go watch the clip, Awful Announcing, I know, put it up, and they lead the charge on this kind of stuff. It's a Twitter handle. It's a Twitter, page. But it is ridiculous to even consider it. And especially when you look at what was said here, what on earth are you thinking? Because you know what it does, Tommy? It takes the top team in the American League and it turns all the attention away from how good they are. So your strategy is to never talk bad about our team, but yet now, there was almost no reason people could talk badly about your team. It's one of the great stories in baseball. Right. And you've taken that and you've torn it up, thrown it in the trash, and you said, all right, everybody, hate the Orioles here. Who are the people that make these decisions? I mean, who sat there and said, you know what, Kevin Brown, we're going to show you. You don't, how dare you show people our record against a certain team? That is blasphemous. You're suspended. Give me a break.
I don't get it. And it sounds like this is coming directly from ownership is what I've read. And that's a bad look. I mean, that's terrible. And I don't know. I mean, I get the fact that if, it's a team owned thing and whatever, and you want to paint a good picture and blah, 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 blah. Didn't say anything bad. And the other thing too, I want to point out is that not only did he mention what was going on as far as the Orioles and their recent history against the Rays, which hasn't been good, it wasn't just him talking about it. There were graphics on the screen, like things like that. So it's not just the broadcaster. Like, this is something that clearly was put together. And I don't know how production works in that world. You know more about that than I do, but there's got to be more people in place with that than just the play-by-play guy. So I don't exactly know why he's the scapegoat in all of that when clearly there were other people in play.
I love seeing, you should go, like, if you haven't, go look, like it. The reaction in other people's broadcasts on this is fantastic. And this is what being viral is, right? Here, the White Sox, Jason Benetti, who I think is pretty young too. We've heard him do a variety of games and things. He said that as he's talking about, it's a White Sox Yankees game. He said, they did beat Baltimore 6 times, which I hope doesn't get me suspended by the Orioles for saying that. I mean, it's like across the sports spectrum. Good for Kevin Brown, man, because it takes stuff like that. Like when teams try and pull off, like when they try to go to this nonsense, it's like, man, what are we doing here? Like, your fans don't even want that. Your fans would be opposed to it. And could you imagine walking into the office today, being the person that made that call, whether it's middle management all the way up to ownership, and having to like sit down for your meeting after you made this decision? What would be worse, being the person that made the decision or the person that has to be like, so, all right, guys, let's get this thing started here. We probably need to talk about and address this Kevin Brown situation here. This is kind of a thing now. Like, which one would you rather be? Like the middleman that has to bring it up to the guy who made the decision, or the guy that made the decision? I feel like the middleman, it would be worse.
Yeah, that's not a good place to be in, because I guarantee you it wasn't the owner calling the broadcaster. It went down to whoever the producer is, or I don't exactly know how that works, but yeah, that's a tough position to be in, especially when you know that it's probably ridiculous.
It's not probably ridiculous. It is ridiculous.
Well, it is.
I think about it too. Like we air Royals games on this network. Could you imagine? Like if we had some directive, and it's not apples and oranges, the Royals don't pay me, but like some directive, and thank goodness we never get things like this of like, hey, listen, we can't talk bad about the Royals. What? Like, what? Are you kidding me?
I guess we don't talk about them at all.
Well, and it's not that. I'm not trying to be like funny there. It's like we have an obligation to talk about reality, right? And discuss things, and and I'm the world's biggest optimist. Like we talk about things and always look to the positive side of them. But if we're not honest, like if you're not honest with your audience, what are you? Like that, like people don't, why do people love to hate Skip Bayless? Because they feel like he's never actually telling what he thinks, right? Like he's just saying something to get a rise out of people. That's not what you strive for. And again, especially when you go look at the clip of what Brown did there, which was nothing. Like absolutely nothing. He was seriously pulling a statistic out about his team versus the team they happened to be playing in that moment. That was it. I just like the amount of pettiness there. Like, come on. It's just the appropriate reaction. I love that, a baseball announcer becomes the viral moment of the day. I mean, they're talking about this on the cable news networks this morning. Like it hits. You never know when that virality is coming for you. And honestly, I think sometimes it's like, just don't ever happen, because you just don't know how it could happen, and it can go out of control sometimes. But this is one of those moments where it's like the Orioles deserve this, right? Like the Orioles deserve every bit of this.
They do. And they're eating it right now. I think that's going to continue. And the fact that they really haven't owned up to it either. I mean, this is going to continue for a while until Kevin Brown is back in the booth. And, if I were him, I'd be looking for another team to broadcast for. That's the way you're going to be treated by ownership. And I guarantee you there are a bunch of teams out there that would jump on him immediately.
Yeah, it is whatever. Go watch the video. It's a really funny story that's happened now in the aftermath, because I think Kevin Brown's going to be just fine. It's not funny that it happens. It's ridiculous, but like the reaction to it is pretty funny if you're looking something to entertain you today. All right, 869-1240. Let's do our last giveaway here, Jad. Let's do a free iced tea and a free coffee drink brew house, which can be, hot espresso drinks, iced coffee, all kinds of different stuff, iced espresso drinks. But the brew house offerings are only available right now at the east location of HTO, which is 21st and 127th. We'll also throw in a free iced tea, which is good both west and east, west at 13th and Tyler, coming soon to Derby as well. But you can get your hands on a couple of drinks on us here at Sports Daily to HTO right now, 869-1240. To our first caller during the break, we'll come back. We'll continue with more sports talk on Sports Daily right after this. All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily here. I'll take you the rest of the way alongside Jad Chambers. Congratulations to all of our winners of our giveaways today. We've had Thomas Rhett concert ticket giveaway. We've had Def Leppard Motley Crue ticket giveaway, Blue Beetle movie ticket giveaway, and some HTO iced tea and coffee to give away on the program today. So congratulations to everybody. Doug, our final winner there of the HTO. Doug, hope you enjoy it. On us. Programming note, I'll be on CBS Sports Radio nationally, coast to coast this weekend. I'll be on a shift. It's 11 to 4 here Central Time. Trying to get a lot of guests booked up. I want to talk to people, connected to a lot of these situations with this expansion. So we'll do some of that. Maybe even a special guest appearance by former Sports Daily host and founder Bruce Hurdle. We'll get trying to get a report on the Denver Broncos from Bruce down there in Denver now, reporting boots on the ground. So we'll do all of that again. Hope you're able to tune in, call in if you'd like, but it's always a lot of fun to get the pulse of the nation there with CBS Sports Radio and doing that nationally. Recap a little bit of what we talked about today. Brett Veach talked yesterday about Chris Jones to the Kansas City Star. Said, and compared it, which was interesting because we've talked about this a lot on this show, compared it to the Tyreek Hill situation when they ultimately traded Hill. And Veach cited this situation as one of the reasons they traded Hill, because they knew they couldn't get that done and this deal with Chris Jones done. Well, I suspect that Chris Jones has come in what he wants a little higher than what the Chiefs were expecting. So now we have a situation where Kansas City has a decision to make, and can they afford some other people down the road if they, can get to the number Chris Jones wants, and that's where we have the decision. But Brett Veach did emphasize that they have no intention of trading Chris Jones. So, no intention of trading him. I think if you're in Jones camp and want him there, that's a good sign there. I'm still curious to see if there is any possibility that he plays on a tag this year, which I think for the Chiefs is an intriguing option, quite frankly, allows them to sort of circle back and think of a long-term plan, because the reality, as I would see it, and again, I love Chris Jones and hope he's a Chief forever for the rest of his career, which is, I think, is what the Chiefs want too. It's just that at some point they have to make a call here. But, in 2025, in 2 years, you've got both Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith coming into free agency. And I just think it's absolutely critical as Mahomes gets older that offensive line is rock solid always. Think about how bad it got for Ben Roethlisberger there at the end, when the Steelers line fell apart. Think about how difficult that was. Have you watched the Netflix, series on quarterbacks? And I'm not all the way through it, but I saw the episode on injuries and rehabbing. Think about the difficulties Kirk Cousins has with injuries, as the Vikings for a lot of years have been trying to rebuild that line. To me, the second most important thing for the long-term, window of the Chiefs while Mahomes is there is making sure Mahomes is upright and protected. He was able to play through a painful and bad injury last year, late in the year. You can't always do that as you get older. Father Time never loses. And Tom Brady set this blueprint, right, of how you do it. You take care of your body. I mean, Tom Brady played until he was 45 years old. How? That dude never got hit. And a lot of that's on him, right? Get rid of the ball, move around a little bit, mobility in the pocket and all those things. But it's also on the Patriots for always giving him a good offensive line. And I think if you're the Chiefs, you have to consider that as you consider everything. And I think that the Chiefs have told us that, by the way, they've attacked the left tackle position by the money they spent on Joe Thuney, by the draft capital they spent on both Humphrey and Trey Smith. I mean, they're telling us without telling us how much of a priority that offensive line is for that organization. And I agree with that. So as they make their way through this Chris Jones negotiation, they've got to be thinking 2 and 3 years down the road in free agency, just as Brett Veach said yesterday they did with Tyreek Hill when he was ultimately traded. Now, who do I think is, more important to the chances of winning a Super Bowl, Chris Jones or Tyreek Hill? Well, because you have Mahomes, I would say Chris Jones, right? Chris Jones is as impactful a defensive player as there is in this league. Tyreek Hill is incredible. He's a Hall of Famer. He was unbelievable last year. I don't think he's crazy when he says he's going to try for 2,000 yards in a season. But for the Chiefs, right, maybe not the same level. And that's why another team paid him. Look, Tyreek Hill, if you ask me, like the Dolphins, who's more important, Tyreek Hill or maybe their best defensive player, I would say Tyreek Hill. But for the Chiefs, it wasn't. And they chose Chris Jones at that point. Now they got to finish that deal and get it done. I don't know what the holdup is. I would guess that it's length of the deal, not as much total dollars. I think in the short term, they can find a way to maneuver the dollars on a yearly basis. But can they do it for 4 years? And are they comfortable doing it for a guy who's, going to be north of 30 after this year and has had a bit of an injury history in this league, been healthy fully for a season one time. It was last year, and he was awesome, and he is awesome, and he's one of the most impactful players in the game. But it gets us back to the conundrum the Chiefs currently face and how they're going to handle it. Both sides are still amicable. I think that's a good sign. I think they get something done, even if it was just a play on a tag, and then, you kick the can down the road a little bit and see what happens. But that's, of course, the big story right now in Chiefs camp as they get ready to play their first preseason game on Sunday in New Orleans. So, that is something to pay attention to, and we continuously will. It has been quiet from both fronts other than, Brett Veach sitting down with the Star yesterday. That's a good sign. That is a good sign, I think, if you want Chris Jones back. Because we all know in the NFL, sometimes these things get noisy. And that's what you don't want if you're wanting Chris Jones to be there. All right. We'll come back. We'll tell you what's on tap. Again, a big congratulations to Travis, who's headed to see Thomas Rhett on us, to Grant, who's headed to see a sneak peek of the new Blue Beetle superhero movie, to Brian, who's headed to Tulsa for Def Leppard and Motley Crue, and to Doug, who wins some HTO iced tea and coffee. Congratulations to all those winners. Guess what? We'll have all those prizes back on the table for you tomorrow as well. It is a generous week. Really, it's a generous 2 weeks here on Sports Daily as we count down to the fall and get ready for football to kick into full swing. So we appreciate that. Your chances to win will come tomorrow in the next few days as well. We'll come back. We'll tell you what's on tap with the network today as we wrap up this Tuesday edition of Sports Daily. All right, that'll do it for us, everybody. Quick note, Cole Reagans yesterday, we didn't talk about it for the Royals, was great. The Royals lost, but he was fantastic. Remember, he came over in the Chapman trade. 11 strikes out in 6 2/3. The Royals try and get back on track and get a win against the Red Sox. Tonight, coverage begins at 6 o'clock right here on KFH as Bobby Baseball continues his tear. Royals giving us a lot to listen to lately. I'm excited about that. Jim Rome follows us at 11. Bob and Jeff from 2 to 4 here locally. CBS Sports Radio programming for a couple hours before that Royals game. So we'll have it up for you. Congratulations, contest winners. We'll have more of that coming for you tomorrow. For Tommy Castor, Jad Chambers, I'm Jacob Albracht. See you then.